For the longest time, we've thought about cybersecurity as basically building a fortress. Taller walls, stronger gates, you know the drill. But things have changed. It's not just about keeping people out anymore. Now, it's about finding the intruders who have already, very quietly, slipped right past our defenses. This whole idea of actively searching for them, that's what we call threat hunting.
It's the first question we're all taught to ask, right? We set up our firewalls, we install antivirus, we use multi-factor authentication, we put all this energy into locking the doors and barring the windows. But that whole approach, it's built on one big and honestly, pretty shaky assumption.
And here it is. This is the question that just changes the entire game. What if they're already in? This is the core problem threat hunting was born to solve, and it starts with a pretty unsettling idea.
Think about your normal security tools like a 911 call center. They're totally reactive. An alarm goes off, a signal gets triggered, and then they jump into action. But the really smart attackers, they're like ghosts. They don't trip the obvious alarms. They're not going to bring their own noisy, suspicious tools. Instead, they'll use the tools that are already on your system, basically turning your own stuff against you. And that creates this massive blind spot for our traditional security.
This right here, this really gets to the heart of it. Reactive security is all about alerts. It literally just waits for a known bad guy to show up and trigger something. But threat hunting, that's proactive. It's driven by a hypothesis. It doesn't sit around waiting for an alarm. It's out there actively searching for weird behaviors that might mean a threat is already inside. It's the difference between waiting for your house to be on fire versus looking for a little bit of smoke before it turns into a blaze.
So how exactly do they stay so hidden? Well, one of the sneakiest tricks is called living off the land. I want you to imagine a burglar breaking into a house, but instead of using his own crowbar, he finds the homeowner's tool set and uses that to crack the safe. That's what attackers do. They use legitimate programs already on your computer, like PowerShell, to do their dirty work, so everything looks totally normal. They also use stuff like fileless malware, which only exists in the computer's memory, so there's no file for an antivirus to even find. It's this kind of stealth that lets an attacker hang out in a network for weeks or even months, completely unnoticed.
Okay, so to be a good hunter, you have to make a pretty big mental shift. It's a whole new way of thinking. You have to stop asking if you'll get breached and just start with the assumption that you already have been. I know, it sounds super pessimistic, but it's actually one of the most powerful mindsets you can have in security today.
And this right here, this is the threat hunter's mantra. It's not about being paranoid. It's about being diligent. It's about taking control of the situation and finding the threat before it gets a chance to do what it came to do, whether that's stealing your data or launching a ransomware attack.
All right, so if we're working on the assumption that an attacker is already inside, how in the world do we find them? Well, a real threat hunt isn't just wandering around in the dark hoping you bump into a bad guy. It's a structured, methodical process. So let's break down what that actually looks like.
Honestly, it's a lot like being a detective. It all kicks off with a hunch, or what we call a hypothesis. From there, you start gathering your clues. That's all your data and system logs. Then comes the real investigation, where you're digging through that data, looking for anything that seems out of place, any weird patterns. If you find something solid, you escalate it. That's basically making the arrest. And finally, and this part is so important, you document everything you found to make your defenses stronger so the next attacker has an even harder time.
Now, a hypothesis doesn't have to be some crazy, complicated theory. It can be super straightforward. Something like, hey, based on what we're seeing out there, I think an attacker might be using PowerShell to jump from one machine to another inside our network. See, that simple statement gives the whole investigation a sharp focus and a clear place to start.
So you've got your hypothesis. Now you need the right gear to actually go on the hunt. You need a good map of the territory. You need a way to see what's happening everywhere, and you need some powerful tools to help you analyze everything. Let's take a look at the hunter's arsenal. The single most critical map for any threat hunter is something called the MITRE ATT&CK framework. The best way to think of it is as a giant encyclopedia of every tactic and technique that cyber attackers use in the real world. It's literally the attacker's playbook. So instead of guessing what they might do, hunters can use this framework to look for very specific, known bad behaviors.
And the framework is pretty easy to understand. It's broken down into two main things. First, you have the tactic. That's the attacker's what, their big picture goal, like achieving persistence on a computer so they can still be there after a reboot. Then you have the technique. That's the how, the specific method they use to do it, like creating a scheduled task. This structure lets hunters build incredibly precise searches.
And these are the go-to tools hunters use to actually see all those behaviors. A SIEM is like a central logbook pulling in data from all over the network into one place. Your EDR and XDR tools? Those are like having high-def security cameras on every single laptop and server, just watching for anything suspicious. And finally, SOAR platforms help automate parts of the process, so analysts can respond to threats way faster.
So let's kind of zoom back out and bring this all together. Why go through all this effort? Well, because when you make that shift from being reactive to being proactive, you fundamentally change the entire security game. You put the power back where it belongs, with the defenders.
And the payoff is just massive. First off, you crush something called dwell time. That's the amount of time an attacker gets to roam around your network without being noticed. By hunting, you can shrink that window from months down to days, maybe even hours. You also end up constantly improving your automatic defenses, and you get a much better sense of what normal actually looks like in your environment.
But you know, for all this incredible technology we just talked about, the most important part of threat hunting can't be automated. At its core, this is a human discipline. The most powerful tool in the arsenal is the analyst's mind, their curiosity, their persistence, and their simple refusal to believe that just because things are quiet, everything is safe.
In the end, it all comes down to this one simple, powerful idea. Look, any decent security team can respond to a flashing red light, but it takes a great security team to go looking for trouble when everything seems quiet, to find the threats that are trying their hardest not to be found. That's the real difference maker. And that kind of leaves us with one last, pretty sobering question to think about. Right now, in the quiet of your own network, with no alarms going off, what could be hiding in the shadows? The only way to really know for sure is to start hunting.